What kind of worthless junk did you give me? My father didn't lower his voice. He wanted the entire patio to hear it. 38 guests stood frozen under string lights. Champagne glasses paused midair. My mother's smile stiffened but didn't disappear. It was his 58th birthday. I had spent 3 months saving for a leather watch strap he'd once admired in a store window. He held it up like evidence at trial. "This," he laughed, "this is what I raised?" The word raised hung there like a threat. I felt the heat in my face before I felt the impact. His palm struck my cheek hard enough to turn my head sideways. Not dramatic, not movie loud, just flat, humiliating. Someone gasped. Nobody intervened. My father adjusted his cufflinks. "Get inside," he muttered. "Don't embarrass me further." Embarrass him. That word did something to me, because I had spent my whole life trying not to embarrass him, carrying trays, smiling politely, letting him introduce me as still figuring things out. He turned back to his guests within seconds. "Anyway," he said, chuckling, "kids these days." The party resumed, just like that. I stood there, cheek burning, holding the empty gift box, and something inside me, something quiet and patient, stopped trying. I didn't cry in front of them. I walked through the kitchen, grabbed my jacket, slipped out the side gate. Nobody followed me, not even my mother. By the time I reached the end of the street, the music had swallowed the moment whole. I didn't know it yet, but that slap wasn't the worst thing he'd ever done to me. It was just the last thing he'd ever do without consequences. 2 hours later, a black SUV slowed beside me, and the man inside already knew my name. Before we go any further, where are you watching from right now, and what time is it there? I always want to know who's on the other side of this story. If this opening hit you even a little, like the video and subscribe. It tells me you want more stories where the quiet ones stop staying quiet. Now, my name is Lena Carter. I'm 24 years old, and for most of my life, I believed I was the problem. Not dramatic, not rebellious, just disappointing. My father, Victor Carter, owned Carter Industrial Logistics, a mid-sized transportation company that serviced manufacturing plants across 3 states. He liked to call it the family legacy. I was never part of that legacy, at least not visibly. I worked part-time at a bookstore downtown. I paid my own phone bill. I avoided arguments. I learned early that silence kept the temperature down in our house. But here's what I didn't understand that night. On paper, legally, I wasn't just his daughter. I was listed as a corporate officer in his company, vice president of operations, salary $142,000 annually. I had never seen a dollar of it. I had never signed a contract. I had never stepped foot inside his office building. But according to federal filings, I was responsible for oversight on 3 high-value logistics contracts now under investigation. I didn't know any of that while I walked down Maple Avenue, cheek burning from the slap, heels in my hand because I couldn't breathe in them anymore. All I knew was that I couldn't go back. That's when headlights slowed beside me. Black SUV, tinted windows, engine low and steady. The passenger window rolled down. "Lena Carter?" I didn't answer. The man inside didn't ask again. "We've been trying to reach you." The next 5 words he said made my legs go weak. I didn't get into the car. Not immediately. Every instinct told me to keep walking. The man inside looked mid-40s, navy windbreaker, clean haircut, no smile. The kind of neutral face you see on people trained not to react. "I'm Special Agent Morales," he said, holding up a badge just long enough for the metal to catch the streetlight. "We're investigating Carter Industrial Logistics." My father's company name sounded strange coming from a stranger. "I don't work there," I said. He studied me for half a second. "That's not what federal filings show." My chest tightened. "What filings?" He opened a folder on his lap and turned it so I could see. My name. Lena Marie Carter, Vice President of Operations, authorized signatory, my date of birth, my social security number, printed clean and official. "There are contracts under review," he continued calmly. "Several of them carry your digital authorization." I felt the ground tilt. I've never signed anything. That's why we're here. Not accusing, not sympathetic, just factual. Miss Carter, he said, lowering his voice slightly, if you didn't knowingly authorize those contracts, you're either a victim or a co-conspirator. The word hit harder than the slap. Co-conspirator. I stared at my own name on a document I had never seen before. My father hadn't just humiliated me, he had positioned me. Get in, Morales said evenly. We need to talk before this becomes public. The party music from 2 blocks away drifted faintly through the air. My family laughing, toasting, celebrating. And suddenly I understood something cold and precise. The slap wasn't anger, it was pressure. And when Agent Morales told me how long they'd been watching my father, everything I thought I knew about my family collapsed. I sat in the back seat, not because I trusted him, because I needed answers. The door shut softly, no dramatic lock, no speeding away. Agent Morales remained in the passenger seat while another agent drove, calm, controlled, professional. We've been investigating your father's company for 7 months, said Morales. 7 months? On what? My voice sounded smaller than I liked. On inflated freight invoices, phantom subcontractors, federal transportation grants routed through shell vendors. He paused. And 3 executive approvals tied to your credentials. My credentials? I don't even have access to his office. Morales nodded slightly. That's consistent with identity misuse. He slid another paper toward me. It was a digital authorization record, time-stamped, IP address linked to Carter Industrial Headquarters, signature block, Lena M. Carter, VP Operations. That's not my signature. We know. The calm way he said it scared me more than if he doubted me. If you cooperate, this stays straightforward. If you don't, you'll be indicted with him. Indicted. My father wasn't just reckless. He was strategic. He'd put me on paper as insulation. If the contracts failed, if the audit exposed irregularities, I would take the fall. Suddenly, the slap made sense. It wasn't humiliation. It was intimidation. He needed me small, compliant, unlikely to question anything. Morales leaned slightly closer. Miss Carter, were you ever given corporate paperwork to sign? And that's when I remembered the envelope. 2 weeks ago. Just sign here, my father had said casually. I refused. For the first time in my life. And now I understood why he'd lost control at his birthday party. Because the document I refused to sign would have made me legally responsible for everything he stole. It had been a Tuesday night. Nothing dramatic, just dinner at home, the television murmuring in the background. My father called me into his office the way he always did when he wanted compliance. Not conversation, compliance. The desk was cleared except for a single folder. Just routine corporate housekeeping, he said casually. Sign and date. I remember flipping through the pages. Dense language, authorization clauses, liability transfers. One sentence stood out. Executive acknowledgement of operational oversight and financial compliance responsibility. I had looked up. I don't work for you. He smiled thinly. Your family. That was always his argument. Family meant obedience. Family meant silence. But something in the wording felt off. For what exactly? I asked. He leaned back in his chair. It's symbolic, optics. Clients feel better seeing continuity. Continuity. As if I were part of some legacy plan. I'd like to read it properly, I said. His expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. That won't be necessary. I'll think about it, I replied. That was the first time I'd ever told him no. He didn't yell that night. He just closed the folder slowly and said, we'll revisit it. Now, sitting in the back of a federal SUV, I understood what that document was. It was insulation. If investigators moved forward, I wouldn't just be listed on old contracts. I'd be actively affirming oversight. I'd be legally tied to the fraud. Agent Morales listened carefully as I described the meeting. Did you keep a copy? He asked. No. He nodded once. That refusal might have saved you. Saved me? From my own father. I stared out the window at dark suburban houses passing by. He hadn't been angry about a gift. He had been angry about losing leverage. And now the investigation was accelerating. Morales checked his phone. "Your father doesn't know we've spoken to you. Yet." He looked at me steadily. "That changes tomorrow." And when the warrants were signed the next morning, my father's birthday party became the last normal night he would ever have. I didn't go home that night. Agent Morales dropped me at a small, quiet hotel off the interstate. Neutral walls, no questions asked. He said, "Stay here, we'll contact you in the morning." I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, because everything was rearranging itself in my head. At 7:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered immediately. "It's Morales," he said. His tone was different now, sharper, activated. "You mean?" "Yes, search and seizure at Carter Industrial Headquarters and your family residence." Residence. Home. The kitchen where I'd grown up. The patio where he'd slapped me 12 hours earlier. "What should I do?" I asked. He said, "Nothing. That's the point. You've done nothing." I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, hands shaking despite myself. At 8:03 a.m., my phone lit up again. This time it was my mother. 3 missed calls, then a text. "What did you tell them?" Tell who? I hadn't said a word to anyone except federal agents. Another text followed. "They're here." I didn't answer. At 8:17 a.m., social media began lighting up. A neighbor posted a blurry photo. Black SUVs, marked vehicles, 2 uniformed officers on the front lawn, caption, "FBI at Carter House?" My father had spent his entire life protecting his image. Board member at the Chamber of Commerce, keynote speaker at local business events, self-made success story. And now, federal agents were carrying boxes out of his office. My phone rang again. Victor Carter. I stared at the screen. It rang 5 times. 6. Then voicemail. Seconds later, a message came through. His voice wasn't yelling, it was controlled. "Lena, call me immediately." Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Where are you?" Call me. I finally understood something fully. He wasn't worried about me, he was calculating damage. And when they walked him out in handcuffs at 9:42 a.m., the man who called me worthless couldn't look at me anymore. I didn't plan to be there, but I was. Agent Morales called at 9:30. "If you want to see this through," he said, "you should come." So I did. I stood across the street, not on the lawn, not near the cameras, just far enough to see clearly. Neighbors gathered in clusters, pretending they weren't staring. Phones up, whispers low, speculations spreading. The front door opened. 2 agents stepped out first. Then my father, Victor Carter, suit pressed, hair combed, jaw tight. His hands were cuffed in front of him, not behind. Controlled restraint. Public, but procedural. The same man who had laughed at me in front of 38 guests less than 24 hours ago. He scanned the crowd, looking for control, looking for allies, looking for an angle. Then his eyes found me, across the street. No tears on my face, no pleading, no running toward him, just standing, watching. For a second, just a second, something flickered across his expression. Not rage, not even anger. Recognition. The insulation had refused to insulate. An agent guided him down the steps. Cameras clicked. Someone from the local news station pushed forward. "Mr. Carter, any comment on the federal charges?" He didn't answer. He kept looking at me, as if trying to calculate whether I'd betrayed him. I hadn't. I had simply stopped protecting him. As they placed him into the back of the SUV, he finally broke eye contact, and I understood something that felt heavier than satisfaction. Power doesn't disappear loudly. It dissolves when the person it depends on steps aside. The door shut. The SUV pulled away. Victor Carter had spent 24 years controlling every narrative. At 9:42 a.m., he lost that privilege. But the real damage didn't happen in front of cameras. It happened in the indictment that followed. By noon, the news had a headline: "Local logistics CEO arrested in federal fraud probe." Subheadline: "Daughter listed as corporate officer. Authorities confirm she is cooperating." Cooperating, not charged. That word saved me. The indictment unsealed at 1:15 p.m. 14 counts: wire fraud, federal grant misappropriation, false statements on government contracts, identity misuse. They had traced digital authorization signatures back to corporate IP addresses. They had bank transfers linking shell vendors to accounts under his control. They had internal emails discussing temporary executive positioning. That phrase made my stomach turn. Temporary executive positioning. That was me. My name used as structural padding. He hadn't just added me to paperwork randomly. He had elevated me on paper the same month irregular invoices began. If the fraud surfaced early, blame the inexperienced daughter. If it stayed buried, promote the loyal VP. I was never meant to succeed. I was meant to absorb impact. At 3:40 p.m., my mother finally called again. This time, her voice was shaking. "They're saying you knew." "I didn't," I said evenly. "He says you did." "Of course he did. Even in custody, he was redirecting." "You need to tell them you didn't understand the documents," she whispered urgently. "Say you were confused." I closed my eyes. I wasn't confused. I refused to sign. Silence on the other end. Because she remembered that night. She remembered me walking out of his office. She remembered the tension building. "He thinks you set him up," she added quietly. I almost laughed. I didn't set him up. He set me up. And that was the part she didn't know how to answer. By evening, Carter Industrial's stock value plummeted. 2 contracts were suspended. 1 vendor publicly terminated agreements. Board members issued temporary distance statements. The empire he built on image was collapsing faster than I expected. Not because of revenge, because of documentation. But the moment that broke him didn't come from the indictment. It came from the courtroom arraignment 3 days later. 3 days later, the courthouse steps felt colder than the street had that night. Reporters gathered early. Cameras lined the entrance. Victor Carter had built his life on reputation, community boards, charity galas, ribbon cuttings. Now those same cameras waited for him in silence. I didn't sit in the family section. I sat behind the federal team. Not hiding, not supporting, just present. He entered wearing a county-issued suit jacket over his dress shirt. No handcuffs this time, but the escort on either side made the message clear. When he saw me, his jaw tightened. He still believed this was temporary, a misunderstanding, a fixable narrative. The prosecutor read the charges aloud, each count deliberate, each statute number cold. When the judge asked how he pleaded, "Not guilty," he said clearly. He glanced at me as if expecting doubt to crack my composure. It didn't. Then came the question of pre-trial release. The government objected. They cited financial manipulation, obstruction risk, pattern of identity misuse, and then they mentioned me by name. The defendant previously listed his daughter as an executive officer without her knowledge to shield operational liability. The courtroom shifted slightly. Whispers, pens moving faster. My father's composure flickered for the first time. Shield operational liability. That was the polite way of saying he tried to make me take the fall. The judge denied unsecured release, bond set high, travel restricted, corporate control suspended. He would remain under strict supervision pending trial. Not prison yet, but not power either. As deputies guided him out, he passed within 10 feet of me. "Family doesn't do this," he muttered low enough that only I could hear. I met his eyes calmly. "Family doesn't use each other," I replied. And for the first time in my life, he had no response. The trial would come later, but the sentence that destroyed him wasn't handed down by a judge. It came from the boardroom he thought he still controlled. The board meeting happened 2 weeks later, not in a courtroom, in the glass conference room he used to call the war room. Carter Industrial Logistics had always been private, family-controlled, board-loyal, narrative tight, until the indictment. I wasn't supposed to attend, but the federal team advised me to observe, because technically, still, I was listed as Vice President of Operations, a title I never wanted. When I walked in, the room fell quiet. Not hostile, not warm, uncertain. The interim legal counsel began. Given the federal charges and ongoing investigation, the board must vote on immediate executive removal. Executive removal. That meant my father, the same man who told 38 guests I was worthless, the same man who slapped me for refusing to protect him. He attended virtually, monitored, face on screen, expression rigid. "This is temporary," he said. "We will fight these accusations." The board members didn't interrupt, but they didn't nod either, because numbers don't wait for ego. Contract suspended, accounts frozen, investors nervous, reputation unstable. One by one, votes were cast. Yes, 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 yes. Unanimous. Victor Carter was removed as CEO effective immediately. Interim leadership appointed, federal compliance officer embedded, his image erased from the company homepage within hours. No dramatic shouting, no table slamming, just documentation. I stood when the meeting ended. He stared at me through the screen. "You could have helped me," he said quietly. That word again, helped. I felt something steady in my chest. "I did," I said. I refused to lie. The screen went black, and just like that, the man who built his life on control had none left. 6 months later, here's what's true. Victor Carter awaits sentencing. Wire fraud carries weight. Federal misuse carries more. Carter Industrial survives under compliance oversight. And me? My name is Lena Carter. I'm 24. I work at the bookstore still, by choice. I have my own bank account, my own lease, my own signature. And for the first time in my life, it belongs to me. If you've ever been treated like leverage instead of family, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. And remember, the moment you stop protecting someone who's using you, that's the moment their power ends. Like and subscribe if you want more stories where quiet strength wins. Because sometimes the 5 words that destroy a family aren't shouted. They're read aloud in an indictment.